Marines on their own.
I'm not worried. I've been holding Trostland alone for long enough to know what a single soldier can do.
We're planetside, Saint. En route to the nearest objective.
Very good. Expect heavy resistance. Just as you like it.
Fortified State. En route to the nearest objective.
Very good. Expect heavy resistance. Just as you like it. Inserting you in hostile territory without backup. Stick to your objectives.
Don't worry, Seed. As long as no time-bending deities show up, we'll be fine.
plenty of civilian fighters, but deploying them this far out is too dangerous. The Guardian's on their own.
I'm not worried. I've been holding Trostland alone for long enough to know what a single soldier can do.
Operation, Guardian. Clear each sector before it runs out.
guard briefings on the anomaly?
And if not in meetings, at home with Osiris. Vex this and Nine that. Too much warlock talk for a Titan.
Guardian. Let's clear this sector as quickly as possible.
With any luck, we'll be long gone before major reinforcements arrive.
those without guardians went to the Hive.
on the world fueled the scramble to fill a power vacuum. Now everyone's fighting to consolidate its territory. We've replaced the universal threat with a bunch of local ones.
Believe it or not, that's good news. I'd rather fight a series of battles than a whole damn war.
Entities beyond time seem pretty unreliable for specifics. But maybe the... Go for your run. Remember, Guardian, if things get too heavy, just say the word. We'll pull you back to orbit.
Ah, the Guardian will be fine. Not even one god down there. It's walk of cake.
I'm sure Jinju would agree.
I haven't seen much of her lately. She said...
It's a relatively simple assignment, this. I hope you won't be bored.
Just the opposite, Devrim. After dealing with the anomaly, time travel, and advanced metaphysics, a straightforward mission sounds inefficient.
Guardian don't step up, those fires burn the whole system. Plenty of civilian fighters, but deploying them this far out is too dangerous. The Guardian's on their own.
I'm not worried. I've been holding Trostland alone for long enough to know what a single soldier can do.
Guardian don't step up, those fires burn the whole system down.
Recon is light in this sector. Be ready for anything. We're not meeting co-workers who hold you before you die, but anything else.
not just Clovis Bray's granddaughter.
Your grandfather's rather hard to overlook, isn't he? What with that giant robotic head and all. But always remember, he's not the only family you have.
Recon is light in this sector. Be ready for anything. We're not meeting co-workers who hold you before you die, but anything else.
back soon. I know she needs to follow up on this craziness with the Nine. I just hope she doesn't get lost out there. Go for your run. Remember, Guardian, if things get too heavy, just say the word. We'll pull you back to orbit.
The Guardian will be fine. Not even one god down there. It's welcome, gang.
Up on this craziness with the Nine. I just hope she doesn't get lost out there, like Zavala did in The Traveler. He hasn't been the same since.
ready? Please, Guardian. It's busy.
They should put her in charge of the assault team.
Oh, let me check right away. Name, Guardian? Yes. Thank you. Thank you. Oh, let me check right away.
Welcome back, gamers. In today's video, kind of want to go
in the final shape, but I did miss a few things, right? I wasn't as universal as the testing we have in the Edge of Fate, where it basically tested literally everything in the game. So for the stuff I did manage to test in the final shape, I'm going to use that, convert those values using the golden ratio, which is step 2, which is the parasite ratio we talked about in the damage testing video. And using that ratio, we can kind of divide and figure out whether or not something abides by this common ratio or not. If it doesn't, then we know something's up. We know it was either stealth buffed or stealth nerfed, or something about the weapon changed, or something in the way that I tested the weapon might change. So a little disclaimer about the results here. Some of these have asterisks next to them, and I'm going to talk about why maybe my testing methodology caused these changes to appear like a stealth buff or a stealth nerf, and why you maybe should take some of the results with a grain of salt. Now, step 3 also has something similar. We're going to double check anything that's out of the ordinary. Maybe there could be health bar pixel issues or testing error. And we're also going to ignore anything that's under a 2% difference. So remember how I mentioned in my new era of damage testing video, how the lower and lower your damage numbers go because of the rounding system in this game and the counter system in this game for damage on the wipe screen, it gets more and more imprecise. Well, anything that's under a 2% difference has some susceptibility to this kind of feature, I guess, of the damage sandbox now, because the numbers are so crushed. There definitely can be like a margin of error on the wipe screen results and the counter results. So unfortunately, we do kind of have to use wipe screen results for this specific kind of test, because health bar chunking, you know, like for like, is definitely going to have some variance. So yeah, that's just all I wanted to say. You know, we are ignoring anything that's under 2% difference. You're not going to find any of that in these slides. And this presentation would be way longer if we included everything that was also within like a 2% difference as well. So all of these changes are going to be stuff that's above a 2% stealth buff or stealth nerf. Okay, so with that out of the way, let's go ahead and go to our first slide, which is going to be legendary primaries. Now, auto rifles across the board, except the rapid fire auto, did receive a 3 to 4%-ish buff. This was not documented from what I know, and it kind of makes sense that rapid fires were left out of this list because they are kind of the pack leader, right? They are kind of an outlier, positive outlier when it comes to auto rifles. So 3 to 4% stealth buff, pretty cool, pretty welcome. Pulse rifles, though, a little interesting, right? So aggressive burst, heavy burst, lightweight. You'll notice adaptive is missing from this list. All got a 3 to 4% buff, which is fine, right? They're like middle of the pack performers. Kind of makes sense. And then high impact pulse rifles got a 3% nerf, which is definitely a little interesting. Not sure why that's a thing, because high impact pulse rifle is definitely the worst performers of the pulse rifles in general, so not a good look. I mean, all of these are, you know, relatively small single digits, so not really super noticeable, not going to move the needle too much. But when it comes to archetype ranking, for example, this is definitely going to form and change my opinion on some of these pulse rifle archetypes. And then rapid fire pulse has got a 6% buff, which is interesting because they are one of the best performers. This might even push them above heavy burst, which they're like neck and neck right now. So yeah, interesting that rapid fire pulse has got that much of a buff. Yeah, I mean, pretty high for a legendary archetype to receive that much of a buff across the board. Interesting stuff for sure. Scout rifle, 4% nerf to lightweights. Very interesting. Also, something to note here, anything that's not mentioned here was either not changed, so 0% buff or nerf, or sub 2%, right? So when I say scout rifle's got a 4% nerf for lightweight specifically, all the other scout rifle archetypes were basically untouched, right? So very odd that lightweight scout rifle's got a 4% nerf. They weren't like overperforming, I would say, maybe overrated a little bit, but I don't know if they were overperforming. So I don't know if this was an accident. I also, by the way, keep in mind here, I have no idea why Bungie buffs, nerfs, stealth buffs, nerfs things, you know, without saying it. I don't even know if it's intentional. You know, I don't know, right? Some of them kind of make sense from a balancing perspective, but some of these changes just make zero sense whatsoever, right? So I assume it's accidental. But Bungie has definitely shown a penchant recently for just mentioning that they did mean to change something, but they just like didn't include it in the patch notes. Like for example, the speaker sight nerf, right? That just was not in the patch notes. SMGs, aggressive, lightweights, precisions, 4% buff. I mean, fine, cool, whatever, right? Adaptives for whatever reason just didn't get this buff, but that's fine. You know, they weren't like suffering too much, so it's all good. Let's move on to the next slide. Okay, primaries, we're going to talk about exotics now. Sweet Business got a 10% buff across the board on average per shot, including its explosive round. This is not going to make it a meta weapon, unfortunately. I mean, it's only 10%. But if you do want to see its primary DPS, you can check out the sustain tab. I have included Sweet Business there. I don't think it was there before. So pretty cool stuff, little comparison value there. Le Monarch 2% buff. There should be an asterisk next to this one. This could be as a result of testing. So the way Le Monarch is tested when I do testing with it is I just shoot poison arrows like over and over. And the more arrows you shoot, the less damage per shot it's going to look like because the poison DOT doesn't stack. So the less shots you shoot, the more damage per shot it's going to look like. Le Monarch, I don't think I shot less shots this time, but maybe I did. So that could be the result of a 2% buff. 2% is to the point where it's like within margin of error, right? And technically there shouldn't be margin of error with these things because it's wipe screen to wipe screen, but who knows? Maybe the DOT, you know, the DOT is small numbers, so maybe there could be some error there. Outbreak Perfected, this is probably not an error though. 8% buff, that's substantial enough where it's like, this was probably buffed. It could do with Nanite RNG or something like that, because the way I test Outbreak Perfected for max nanites in particular is I have a bunch of friends stack a boss up to max nanites. I tell them to stop shooting, I wait a few seconds, and then I take over and start shooting. And then we just look at the health bar difference from when I start shooting to the end, and we look at my wipe screen values. So yeah, I mean, there could be, I mean, this is probably like a legitimate buff. 8% is big enough that it's probably not a variance thing between the two tests. Next, we have Revision 0. The 2-burst mode looks like it just received the baseline heavy burst pulse buff, which is around 3%. And then the 4-burst mode got an 11% buff, which is interesting. I don't know. This seems like a custom buff. 11% is big enough. Devil's Ruin. This is kind of just a reference number here. Pyrogenesis refers to the new fire sprite thing where you pick it up, you get the special mode, and then you can boom, you know, big laser with an explosion and stuff. Obviously that didn't exist before. It was just like a regular pull down laser charge thing. This is just, I'm saying like it's a 69% buff from the one burst to another, right? From one burst mode to another, 69% buff. Just like a little informational thing, not like an actual like buff note, I guess. And then Final Warning. Testing with this weapon is always interesting because I test it with like the 15-shot tap burst optimal mark thingy. And doing testing that way, I mean, I don't know. It's like a little odd, a little bit of human variance there. I'm pretty sure I did the test. Yeah, I did the test perfectly this time. I don't know if I executed perfectly last time. By the way, for all of these, I'll try to like show clips of me shooting the weapon on screen, like side by side, Final Shape and Edge of Fate. That's probably going to help with, you know, people's attention spans watching this video. So the slides are not too static. But yeah, Final Warning. Probably a real buff, 7%. But yeah, it could also be like a testing variance thing, but you know, I doubt it. Okay, next up we have legendary specials. So rapid fire fusion rifles, again, every other fusion rifle archetype was under a 3% buff or under a 2% buff. This is the only one that got like, you know, a substantial, I guess, 3% plus buff. You know, interesting, I guess, that it got, you know, this much of a buff. I mean, rapid fire fusions definitely didn't need the help. I mean, fusion rifles in general could use a bit of a buff, but rapid fire fusions in particular, I mean, they're like the best performers and everyone kind of knows that. So I'm surprised they received like a small buff, but again, no idea if it's intentional or not. Breach GLs across the board, 3 to 4% buff, area denial, double fire, lightweight micro missile. Aggressive shotguns. Now, a note about shotguns is I actually converted their damage for pellets at least, from crit damage to body damage, because realistically I've realized that if I'm going to do damage calculations with shotguns, if people are using pellet shotguns for damage, usually they're mostly hitting bodies. So I wanted to do a more realistic look at these things, and so I converted all of them to bodies, and I used the crit to body scalars, so like the crit multipliers from Final Shape, in order to make this conversion. So these should still be accurate unless there was a change to the crit scalars or crit multipliers of any specific shotgun archetypes that I wasn't aware of. At least as far as I know, none of those things changed. And so these should be accurate. Aggressive shotgun, around 2% buff. And then you have heavy burst and rapid fire. So heavy burst shotguns were supposed to be buffed. Maybe it was 10% or something like that. I don't know. It was like a patch or two ago, or like a season or two ago. When they were supposed to buff it, they forgot to, and then they actually buffed it this time, 8%. Rapid fire shotguns, though, I don't think these were supposed to be buffed. And because they're already pretty good, they got an 8% buff. That's cool, I guess. And then lightweight shotguns got an 8% nerf. which is interesting because I don't think they were overperforming. And their damage profile was like pretty decent, but their total damage was pretty mediocre. They probably needed a buff, if anything. So I'm a little surprised they got an 8% nerf, but it is what it is. Interesting, I guess. Rocket sidearms. Now, the reason they got an 8% nerf, but it is what it is. Interesting, I guess. Rocket sidearms. Now, the reason where there's an asterisk here is because it is what it is. Interesting, I guess. Rocket sidearms. Now, the reason where there's an asterisk here is because rocket sidearms, the thing about Templar that some people might not know is that he doesn't take full damage from weapons that have an explosive and an impact component unless he's like fully up in the air during his ritual of negation. I think for heavy gels and rockets, this doesn't really matter. I think the damage is like normal. But for stuff like rocket sidearms and like mountaintop, for example, if you shoot Templar while he's just like kind of floating on the ground, it does reduce damage for some reason. And then finally, trace rifles, adaptive trace rifles across the board got a 3% buff, which is, you know, that's chill. Only trace rifle archetype, so I don't know why I wrote adaptive, but, you know, 3% buff, that's chill. Okay, moving on, let's talk about exotic specials. Some interesting stuff here, some of the biggest and most important changes on this slide. Number one is Choir of One's hit scan mode got a 14% buff, so this is not insignificant at all. Definitely incentivizes people to use the hit scan mode more, especially when I talk about the next change, which is the 32% nerf that the Choir of One projectile mode received. Now, this is specifically when you're stepping back a little bit. Remember, Choir used to do extra damage. If you step back a little bit, you space it a little bit, 8-10 meter range, that's kind of the sweet spot for Choir. That got nerfed by 32%. That is a lot. Okay, if you go to my spreadsheet right now and you look at the projectile mode versus the hit scan mode, DPS in the sustain tab of Choir of One, the projectile mode is like, ooh, that's a kicker. 32%. That is a, like, I would say that is maybe top 3 most significant weapon nerfs that are mentioned in this presentation that were not mentioned in the patch notes. That is a huge nerf. So yeah, I don't think this was unintentional to nerf it by that much. And I, you know, kind of surprised on the lack of communication on this one, honestly. That's a big nerf to the projectile mode of Choir. Telesto, 8% nerf. Don't know why, but I guess that's a thing, yeah. And then Tessellation, another one. Property Irreducible, which is the special mode where you consume your grenade and you get the big boom. 16% nerf, which is also pretty substantial to not include in the patch notes. Speedrunners kind of do like Tessellation because we use it to one-shot mini bosses and like raids and stuff. You know, prep a little nade, kaboom, pretty nice stuff. Good for clearing a bunch of ads too. So yeah, kind of a shame. I don't know why Tessellation got nerfed. I really didn't need the nerf, to be honest. It was a nice gun. Probably could have buffed it, you know, but all good, happens. Edge of Concurrence, 5% buff. This could have to do with the fact that now it has Jolt on hit, I believe. Or like some version of jolting feedback. So that could have come from like the jolt damage increase that, you know, it has now. So ignore that, you know, probably not an actual buff. Exteris, 4% buff. Probably has to do with the across the board breach shield buff. Makes sense. Wither Horde, 6% buff, but specifically the ground pool, which is weird because the direct stick did not get a buff. Just the ground pool. So nice. That's cool, I guess. And then Lord of Wolves, I put an asterisk here. This is not an actual buff. Lord of Wolves does the same damage. It's just last season I tested without ignitions. Like I didn't shoot Lord of Wolves long enough to get ignitions. This season I actually shot for long enough to get ignitions. And so this is with including the ignition damage. That's a 7% buff overall to Lord of Wolves. But the actual gun itself did not get buffed. I just didn't shoot it enough last season. Okay, next up, let's go ahead and talk about a couple more exotic specials. Chaperone, 4% nerf, pretty insignificant. Fourth Horseman, again, this could have to do with the crit to body change that I did this season. But yeah, 13% buff if nothing changed with Fourth Horseman's crit scaler, which I don't think anything did. And so 13% buff. Cloud Strike, 4% nerf on average. Icebreaker, 20% buff to its Shatter Ignition, which is a bit interesting. So this is like when you freeze it with like a Penumbral Blast or something like that, and then you crit, and then you get the Shatter plus the Ignition damage. That went up by 20%. Agriceptor, Will Given Form. They changed shatter damage scaling, by the way, so manual and auto shatters are all the same number now. So a lot of shatter related stuff, you'll see like Glacier Grenades later on, did get nerfed as a result of this because they don't scale anymore. So yeah, Agriceptor is probably a victim to this. Will Given Form, 8% nerf across the board on average per shot when you have that active. You know, it's still pretty decent though. And then Dead Messenger, technically a 200% buff because all 3 waves of Dead Messenger, I know they patched this in PvP. I know they patched it in PvP, but if you use Dead Messenger in PvE right now, all 3 waves do full damage on a single target. So technically 200% buff. So it's actually in my sustain tab now, Dead Messenger. Pretty decent, right? Solid total damage. I believe it has basically the exact same damage profile as Microcosm, which is a funny comparison point, I guess. You know, if you shoot Microcosm with Paracausal Imbuement and you just manually reload the gun versus if you just shoot Dead Messenger repeatedly at a target with the fundamentals active, it does the same total damage and DPS. So cool, I guess. Shout out Dead Messenger. If you haven't tried Dead Messenger this season for killing majors and stuff, try it out. It has demo, has fundamentals. You know, fundamentals are pretty nice. Okay, legendary power weapons. Not a lot to talk about here. Machine guns, aggressives, and rapids specifically got a 3% buff, which is chill. Swords, I would take this with a grain of salt. Variety of swords, Bequest, Caster, Vortex Wave, got 2% nerfs and buffs. I think that this just has to do with Pack Hunter RNG, because all of these were with Pack Hunter. And on Riven, sometimes when you like heavy attack Riven, your wolf packs will just like hit a wall or something or track into an ad. So that probably has to do with it. Just ignore this. Probably not an actual change. Okay, next we have some exotic power weapons. Some interesting changes here for sure. First, Leviathan's Breath received a 7% nerf. Yep, not sure why. 7% nerf. Anarchy got a 6% buff. Colony with Direct Impact, this was intended, got a 15% buff. Prospector, 11% buff. Prospector there's an asterisk here because the thing with weapons like, for example, Prospector and Deathbringer is that depending on the type of boss model you use it on can definitely change the average damage per shot. Like Prospector, for example, on Riven, if you shoot it under her chin, great place for you to shoot them because all the sub-munitions will hit her. But if you shoot it at like Templar, who's kind of more pointy, right? Not a lot of places for the sub-munitions to get stuck in. Not as good, right? So I think Prospector, originally when I tested it, I used Riven, which is a kind of an unfair, not representative test. And then I used Templar, which is kind of unfair, not representative test because a lot of the sub-munitions were just not hitting him at all. And then I think this time around, I chose to use a boss that was a little bit of like an in-between, like a fair representation. So that's probably why it says 11% buff. Probably not an actual buff, but Prospector per shot damage is pretty hard to measure because it's rather inconsistent. Deterministic Chaos got a 10% buff. Grand Overture, this is a big one, right? Because this was disabled on day one, and I was actually shocked. This was maybe the most shocking of the weapon changes that I found. 20% stealth buff to its regular projectile mode, and 16% stealth buff to the volley mode of the missiles loaded. So had this been allowed on day one, probably would have been really good, but it wasn't. So there's that. And also Outbreak got a stealth buff as well. So interesting stuff. I don't know. This can't be accidental. I don't think Grand Overture getting buff was accidental, but I also don't think Grand Overture really needed a buff. But I mean, it has one. So yeah, I mean, it's not like unbalanced or anything or like crazy OP, but it got a buff. It got a rather significant buff, I would say. Heir Apparent, 14% nerf, and then Thunderlord, 5% nerf. Pretty insignificant. Nobody uses Heir Apparent, and 5% nerf to Thunderlord. It's kind of like whatever, water under the bridge. Okay, let's move on. Nobody uses Heir Apparent, and 5% nerf, 15% nerf, and then Thunderlord, 5%. Rather significant buff, I would say. Heir Apparent, 14% nerf, and then Thunderlord, 5% nerf. Pretty insignificant. Nobody uses Heir Apparent, and 5% nerf to Thunderlord. It's kind of like whatever, water under the bridge. Okay, let's move on. More power exotics. Xenophage, like whatever, water under the Thunderlord, 5% nerf. Pretty insignificant. Nobody uses Heir Apparent, and 5% nerf to Thunderlord. It's kind of like whatever, water under the bridge. Okay, let's move on. More power exotics. Xenophage, 4% buff. Deathbringer, 13% buff. This could have to do with my usage of the weapon. I think I got slightly better, like realistic height tracking this time in terms of the projectiles and trying to do like max fall damage. Dragon's Breath, 15% buff. This was not accidental. This was, I don't think this was testing error either. So 15% buff. Some of the ignition stuff this season got changed a little bit. So yeah, you might see some of these things change. Two-Tailed Fox, 9% buff. Again, same thing. Legend of Acri is 3% buff. I did body shots this time, so it could have to do with like the shotgun crit body scaler changes. Tractor Cannon, this one was interesting, 60% buff. This might be a testing thing. I'll show clips of me testing Tractor Cannon both seasons on the screen. Maybe it's something to do with how I tested. Maybe Tractor does have like weird like pellets, I think. I don't know, Tractor's really weird. It's really weird. One of the weirdest weapons in terms of its like firing model entity hitbox thing. So could have to do, maybe I was face tanking the boss a bit better with Tractor this season, but 60% is a lot. That being said, Tractor still does very little damage per shot. It's not suggesting that just pumping Tractor into an enemy is like gonna be meta or anything, but you know, 60% is a fair amount. Darcy, 2% buff. This might have to do with just like jolt timing or something. I don't know. I'll throw both clips on the screen of me testing in both seasons. But yeah, 2% buff. Probably not an actual buff. Probably just testing variants. And then another surprising one, Worldline Zero, 80% nerf. 80% nerf. So this is definitely a bug. This is definitely unintended. Worldline Zero, before last season, if you did the Tesseract attack, you did the blink, it would have 5 ticks of damage when you hit a boss. This season, if you do the blink, it does 1. It does 1 tick of damage. So definitely unintended. Not sure how that even happened, how that was even changed. But yeah, 80% nerf because 4 out of the 5 ticks are gone. So okay, let's move on to abilities. Grenades. We have solar grenades here. Fusion grenades. I know people were saying that Touch of Flame fusion grenades got nerfed. This is technically not true. I mean, they got a relative nerf versus regular fusion nades. And I think people were probably comparing regular fusion nades to Touch of Flame nades. So they're like, oh, wait, the multiplier is different. So Touch of Flame got nerfed. It didn't get nerfed. It just got a relatively smaller buff versus regular nades. So regular fusion nades. Oh, I think I have these mixed up, by the way. Regular fusion nades, I believe, got a 26% buff, which is listed second. Touch of Flame nades got a 15% buff, which is listed first. Incendiary nades got a 49% buff. Solar grenades at base, just the DOT ticking, 49% buff. And then if you add in Touch of Flame and Sunbracers, so the globs and the extended duration, only a 9% buff overall. And then swarm grenades, again, take this with a huge grain of salt. These might have been buffed, these might have been nerfed. I have no clue, because swarm grenades, when you spam throw them, I use Apotheosis Veil, by the way, when I do my grenade testing. When you spam throw swarm grenades, the submunitions like overload a target and can make it not repeatedly, like the ignition number on your screen, like the ignition will happen, but the second ignition number on your screen will just like not show up. And so when a number doesn't show up on your screen, even though it does the damage to the health bar, it doesn't actually reflect on the wipe screen, right? As I've said before, the wipe screen is basically a counter of all the numbers you see on your screen. And so swarm grenades, I really ran into this problem. Just don't trust the swarm grenade numbers in my spreadsheet. Like I tried a couple times to try to make them consistent. All I know is that swarm grenades are not very good for damage. And so I do not really care that much to test them extremely accurately to remedy this error.
Prestige mode. So seeing this is an actual dub, and I'm very excited for this because it encourages you to learn the raid differently, and obviously you're going to be farming this epic raid more because it's going to give you a chance at tier 5 loot. We'll be getting to that very soon, and also you're going to be able to attune what you're farming for. We missed this a lot with Solstice because right now, since I'm 450, I can just go to Kepler and attune a pair of boots, and I can go in the loot cave and just make sure I get more boots. I do get other pieces to drop, but boots drops the most. We didn't have this in Solstice. So we did say, hey, Bungie, it'd be really cool if we could attune our drops in the raid so we could farm for those gauntlets for each character, chest, boots, class items, and different weapons. So this is a dub. This raid, you will get new legendary weapons, a set bonus, and armor drops. A new quest further unravels the mysteries of space and time, unlocks an attunement system for the raid vendor, which is Apoger's Championes. You can attune the raid vendor and get what drops you want. So this is not all L's, this is actually a W. And you will get the catalyst for the raid exotic. So this is amazing. We're like, holy smokes, this is great. But then it gets worse. For the first 48 hours, there will be an epic raid version of the Desert Perpetual, and it will launch with enemies a lot tougher, more aggressive. You'll be able to play at a fixed power level disadvantage like you normally would on a contest mode, and there's going to be more. They've updated the loot for contest mode, so now on your first clear of each encounter in contest, it's going to drop you tier 5 gear, and if you complete all of them, you can claim an exclusive emblem, a raid exotic, and its catalyst. So literally you just have to beat the raid on epic and you get all this, which is amazing. So then we scroll down. By the way, shout out to CB and Evan. They're going to be returning to Bungie Studios to host this world's first race. They'll be catching a red eye right after my wedding, which is absolutely dope. I'm glad my friends will be there. Then we roll down to this. This is where it gets a little L, okay? And by a little L, I mean a lot. With the release of the epic raid to keep success and encounters focused on action gameplay and create a level playing field for players across the platforms, we're rolling out a newer version of Not Swap for Contest mode. This modifier will now reset your super and ability energy, special ammo, and heavy ammo, as well as remove all ammo and orbs on the ground when you change exotic or legendary armor or weapon ammo types. I do want to point out that you could still swap surges. So if you have your raid set on, instead you go from scavengers to ammo finders. Before damage starts, you can swap over to a triple font and a triple surge setup, and you will not get punished by this. So technically, it's the same thing. This modifier will also take effect when 3 or more feats are activated in the standard difficulty of the epic raid. So if you want to do a 3 feat epic raid after contest mode goes away, Not Swap will be in there. Bungie, it's not our fault. You designed a raid where you just hip fire an outbreak and a Thunderlord. You designed that raid. You wanted us to be in that boring meta, and we had to loadout swap for day one. I said this in previous videos. If you weren't loadout swapping to beat that day one Desert Perpetual raid, you probably didn't win because you had to do 3 loadout swaps pretty much every single encounter. And if your team didn't, congratulations to you guys, but boy, oh boy, that was something. So it's Bungie's fault that they designed a raid like that. Why punish the player base? Also want to point out that the bonus damage and the damage resistance you get on your artifact currently for rocking new gear, you will able to use this in the contest mode. Use that to your benefits to have more damage resist and more damage output. But again, we don't know what the ban list is. They haven't gone over the ban list. Are they going to ban Outbreak? I doubt it. I don't think they're going to punish the player base that bad, but you never know. They could go after it. You never know. If they ban Outbreak, people are just going to be on Thunderlord, and there's going to be a huge ammo problem. Just want to point out here, they are letting you guys know that they will ban you live. If you are playing with cheaters to try and get this clear, like 400 out of the 600 teams did for the world's first race, they will ban you on the spot. Do not pay for cheaters. Do not pay those third-party websites. Don't let anyone join you. Only play with trusted players or you will get banned. Right here, they talk about if you beat all the encounters in the raid, you get more loot. So defeat all 3 bosses before beating the final boss, you get an extra piece of gear. That's a dub. But again, we don't know. We don't know if that's going to be a thing or not. In additional to this, we're introducing 2 weekly challenges. So there's going to be 2 weekly challenges on the raid to give you more loot. The first challenge gives you an extra piece of loot from your first clear on the encounter each week in either version of the raid. Completing this challenge will unlock additional one that provides bonus loot from the epic raid. So this is giving you reason to grind the raid, which I do like about this. This is the good stuff that I like. Grinding the raid and getting that 4-piece raid set, especially at tier 5, I'm all over that because I want that set. We're removing the requirements to complete the combined mastery triumph to increase your gear tier. All Desert Perpetual gear will now drop at tier 2 in the standard version, tier 3 in the epic, no matter what your current power level is. We have added a source of all gear earned during a full clear to drop at up to a +2 of your base tier. Adding feats will increase your chances. That's how you're going to get your tier 5 gear from the epic raid. That makes sense. And last, for future raids arriving in Asher and Iron, players who complete the map and compass quest as well as the epic raid can then approach the Simulant Ansible to receive a new quest. So this is how you're going to get this new quest. Complete this new quest will unlock the ability to attune any previously acquired piece of gear from the Desert Perpetual, improving its chances of dropping from any encounter. So you're going to be able to farm raid gear efficiently. I do think this is a dub, but this is probably one of the only dubs that you're going to see me read. And this is where the portal updates. I just want to point out here before I scald this, Bungie, you're so out of touch. Just because people are doing stuff in the portal right now doesn't mean they're having fun. They wanted more diversity and they don't want their time to just be spat on. You're not valuing people's time right now. You're punishing players for not being high power right now. And you're just encouraging people to not keep playing. The solo ops dominance is especially stark between 400 to 450. That's because people are farming primes. Where the best way to attain prime engrams is to get A grades as fast as possible. I can tell you right now, you do not need A grades to get primes this week. Ignore the side objectives and farm these primes faster. We want to make this more interesting portion of the game, one that makes attaining prime engrams in the portal more rewarding. Starting next week, we are increasing the time limits in Fireteam Ops, direct launch, matchmaking tiers, giving players significantly more time to complete challenging match-made Grandmaster. This should help players reach A grades more consistently, resulting in better reward. Do not get baited by this. Do not even go near Fireteam Ops. It's not worth it. Stay in the mines, do 2-minute runs of Caldera, and get your prime engrams, because it's not going to be easy get more power level like we are in solo op in Ashen Iron. So additionally, they're doing improvements planned for the portal in Ashen Iron. The time bonus system should give more value in trading off speed versus killing everything in Fireteam Ops, and have a meaningful role in earning scores in solo ops and pinnacle ops. Pretty much, they don't want you to go fast. They want you to play Destiny the way you want to play. And what I want you to do is crumble that up after you print it out and wipe your ass with it, because it's such a lie. I'm trying to hold back right now, but it's just, this is so bad. Just, we don't want to go do Fireteam Ops. Yes, we want to get out of the mines, but what's the point? Why do you want to go play Fireteam Ops and do balding activities where you don't get rewarded? I don't want to go do some stupid mechanic where I'm like, hey, help me, I can't move. Come and interact with me and I can't move. We don't care about that modifier. As soon as we see that, pull out your ghost, go to orbit, send me back to solo ops. We don't care. You could put 4 completion rewards in Fireteam Ops, people will not go do it. They don't want to. If people don't want to do that activity, don't force them. Good grades in Fireteam Ops should be less risky and more challenging to get than they are now, and closer to solo and pinnacle ops activities. So pretty much what this means is when you're doing Fireteam Ops, there's sometimes where you kill everything and sometimes you barely get the score. That's not on us. That's on poor design. That has nothing to do with the player base. We don't care. Fireteam Ops should be at least a good place to earn power as solo or pinnacle ops. That's impossible because we're doing solo ops in 3 minutes or less. So Bungie, whoever typed this out, just delete it. You fucked up. But I do agree that Fireteam Ops should be more rewarding. But the fact is, you know in your head that you're going to get a drop every 3 minutes doing solo ops. So if you're not doing another activity that's dropping stuff every 3 to 5 minutes, there's no reason to do it. That's just how Destiny players think. They want to do the most efficient way. This is a huge debut, by the way. The way that equip power and account power is confusing, we're fixing that. So right now, if you're playing on a 400 Titan and then you switch over to your Hunter that's 350, you have to infuse your second character first to go do the portal activities. The way that they're going to do it now is if the game knows you're 400, all your characters are 400, so when you switch to those characters, it will have your account power at 400 and you won't have to infuse, so you can backfill. So this is good. We'd like more variety in Pinnacle Ops, including a way to earn Pinnacle Ops gear matchmaking. Yeah, they baited us with this because when I scroll down, it's going to get worse. We would like to give regular opportunities to matchmake into the activities on Onslaught and the Coil. No one wants to do Onslaught and Coil. We want to make it easier for more obvious for everyone in the fire team to get the best rewards, even at wide power differentials. Still not enough. We think the various Bane's challenges and boons should be well balanced against each other. Yeah, but we just one-shot everything. So we just throw a nade, or we throw a bonk hammer, or we throw a grapple. Everything dies. That's not challenging activities. We also want to think there should be more things to do in general. As we as we add brand new activities to the portal. When I scroll down and show you what they're bringing to the portal, you'll see. Brand new activities, huh? And bring older legacy activities in. We want to be able to feature these more effectively for daily power gain. I think they showed one new activity, but they showed a lot of legacy. And then, this is a W again, they'd like to make conquests repeatable for portal rewards. Should have been like this when it launched. So now let's talk about ultimate difficulty, what you unlock at 451. Ultimate difficulty will be available for Ash and Iron launches. Ultimate difficulty is available starting at 451 power. Ultimate includes 2 new player stakes. Remember, these are optional. Pressure cooker, finish under the time limit or get kicked to orbit. Extinction, all players are limited to a single life. There are no revives. If you want to put these stakes on, you could do them to have more fun, but if you mess up, you go to orbit. These are optional and are intended to provide the most significant challenge to even the most experienced Guardians and include score boost to match. So you will get rewarded for it. What's the point in doing them? Ultimate Fireteam Ops matchmaking will open in week 10, the week after Ash and Iron launches. So 3 days before the raid. Here's where it gets a little weird. Players can reach platinum and diamond rewards ranks will be 450 to 499. Diamond rewards will be 500 to 550. While in platinum and diamond, you can earn an A+ grade in PvE. So they're going to force you to do that A+ grade, it seems like. You will need an A+ to qualify for tier 5 gear until platinum 3, where A grades start giving tier 5. So they're pretty much just pointing out once you hit 500, you'll get spoiled with tier 5. And on the way, 450 to 499, you will get tier 5. So this is good. This will be good. Remember, you're going from 450 to 500. You do not need primes to drop. And this is what I'm talking about. Me, as a grinder, I have to grind out 400 to 450 in primes and 500 to 550 in primes. So that's 100 power levels that I needed to do for primes. Community doesn't have to do that if you're not there. You just get to do normal drops to 500, then primes to 550. But also, I guess it puts me closer to 500, but you know what I mean. Once you reach Diamond 1, B+ qualifies you for tier 5 gear. So pretty much once you hit 500, you could do slow, easy B+ runs and it qualifies you for a tier 5 gear. And at platinum 3, even a B will get you tier 5. So they're just letting you know that once you hit 500, it's GG. We're changing reward multiplier to use account highest power rather than equip power to determine the basis of the multiplier. So that's good. That also applies in PvP as well. Sometimes I would have to switch my gear when I was playing trials to have higher stuff on for tier 5. So that's pretty much going away. There's going to be a new portal booster in Ash and Iron reward pass. If you have it in your normal pass already and you're maxed out, you're okay. And they're just saying if you're already at 15% score boost, which I already am, I get a whopping 10 enhancement cores instead of the boost. They're going to do some time adjustments. Pretty much they're saying going to cook the timers here because they know that people don't take that long. 35-minute Starcross timer and an 8-minute Caldera timer. They're pretty much going to adjust the timers lower because they know that people aren't taking that long to do it. So loadout restrictions, I really didn't understand lower because they know cross timer and an 8-minute Caldera timer. They're pretty much going to adjust the timers lower because they know that people aren't taking that long to do it. So loadout restrictions, I really didn't understand this section either. They're worried about effects of loadout swapping in the portal. Armor 3.0, we wanted to significantly increase the scoring value for locked loadouts, making it, you know,
2019.